Hey, welcome to Lab the Podcast. Grateful to be here with my good friend and member of our V3 team, Jared Thomas. Jared began volunteering with V3. He was our development director, and has been for a few years. Also a part of our Wayfarer Podcast team, and at the same time developing a pretty exciting comedy career as a part of an emerging and growing comedy scene right here in Tampa, and is also the founder of Bayshore Comedy, a comedy production company right here in Tampa Bay, hosting shows, and you've got an upcoming show. So Jared, thanks for making time to talk about laughter and art and a little bit on the podcast.
Of course, happy to be here. This is exciting.
Yeah, we normally are sitting around the table with the rest of the Wayfarer Podcast. This is different. Now you are in the hot seat, so to speak. But yeah, this is cool. You just got back from San Francisco.
Yeah.
Hot take on the West Coast.
Oof, man. Yeah, the red eye back was a little brutal. San Francisco, lovely city.
Yep.
I think similar to Chicago, gets smeared a lot, but like big cities have like good and the bad with it. So loved it. Beautiful weather. I mean, the water. I mean, all of it's just like so amazing. So
yeah. Favorite moment in your trip?
We were on this beach that was like overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge. And there's just this like giant rock that I just like climbed on top of. And I was just like looking at the Golden Gate Bridge, and it was a little cloudy, like a little windy, just beautiful weather. And it was just like one of those moments I was like, I could sit here literally all day and just like look at the water and the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah. I think there's so many places on the West Coast that you fall in love like that. It's a tempting place because it's easy to fall in love with in these moments where it's like the weather breaks and you can see the bridge or you can see the mountains and you're like, why would I ever leave?
Yeah.
And so that's what we always say. You got to stay for a while, because then there's a lot of days where you can't see the bridge. You can't see anything. Yeah. But you had one of those days. You sent me a picture that was just beautiful, and you were out and you can almost feel the air. So all of you West Coast people, we do covet our West Coast neighbors' air. It's something about that air is awesome. Awesome.
A little magic there for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's good. It's a good city. I want to ask you about the comedy scene there. Also comedy here and the story of your journey into that art form. I want to talk about the podcast, and I want to talk about V3 and our work and how humor is a part of it as a signal of transcendence, as Peter Berger would say. So all that's on the table, but let's start with just a little bit of context. You are from Raleigh, and I say that, and people down here know exactly what that is like. But for people who haven't been to Raleigh, and North Carolina is like just an imagination, what's it like?
Yeah, Raleigh's a really cool place. So it's in like central North Carolina. So you're 2 hours from the beach, a couple hours from the mountains. So Raleigh itself is, I feel like, a very like suburban city. Like it has like a downtown, but it's mainly like just all neighborhoods. So it was a really kind of quiet town growing up. Like I didn't feel like too much was going on. Now it's like becoming like a tech hub in the South, which is like fascinating. Like the triangle is in of itself. So it's becoming a really cool place to live, but I feel like I take it for granted a little bit because I grew up there.
Yeah. It's when we moved out, everybody said, oh, North Carolina, like that's where you're going to feel at home because it's most like the mountains. Like that's the Southeast. You want to go to the mountains in North Carolina, but you also have the coast. I have not done any time out that way, right? Like you people go out to the Outer Banks, and South Carolina has Savannah, Charleston, all these different places where people are saying, you got to go visit these places. Where's your favorite place to kind of rest and retreat in North Carolina?
Yeah, it's funny. Someone was giving me a hard time in Florida the other day because I said I was going to North Carolina for a beach trip. And he goes, does North Carolina even have good beaches? And I was like, well, they did make a whole show about it.
Yep.
Not sure if you've seen the Outer Banks on Netflix. I was like, it's a known thing.
Yeah.
So Emerald Isle is like my favorite like little beach. So it's like south of the Outer Banks, but it's just like a really great family beach and has like a lot of local bars and like good restaurant spots that me and my family have been going to for quite a while. So it's just like, you get there and it's like you fall into like a pace that's like great.
Yeah. It's coastal towns. Like that. There's a vibe to Florida has really cool coastal towns, but I think if you get up into the north, you feel more of that fishing coastal, like there's a different vibe and sharks.
You don't have 30-story hotels right on the beach. You have homes and like families. So it's a different vibe for sure.
It's a different vibe.
Florida has good beaches too though.
Take us to your story of connecting with V3. How did you even? We'll get into the journey from North Carolina to Florida, but let's start with V3 and we'll go backwards. We just met each other at an event, but I'll let you tell the story.
Yeah, so I got invited to one of the monthly events, and they're called Wayfarer now, but I forgot what they were called. The
Future Initiatives back
Future
then,
Initiative. So I got invited to that in February of 2022, I believe.
It's crazy.
Was the first one. And so that's where I met you. And like the first thing you said to me was like, you look like a movie star.
He does. Don't you think?
Which it's like, what movie star are we talking
is this live? Can they answer?
Yeah, there's a lot of people
think
who
so.
are movie stars.
Yeah.
So
True.
very funny.
True.
Yeah, so like naturally I was like, I want to be around this guy more. Like if he thinks that of me. Yeah, and it was a really cool event. I mean, it was all about love and seeking the other's highest good. And I think that just like resonated in a way. And at that time I was kind of going through a really big like doubting of my faith and like trying to figure out like what I believed in, what was just given to me. And it was a very like fascinating time where I felt like at a very big low, like in my faith and everything. And that was like kind of the start of me starting to come back to faith and reimagining it and believing it again.
That's awesome. Was it a part of your story, like as a kid? Did you grow up around a Christian environment and home? And was that always a part of the story, or did that come later in life?
Yeah, it was always a part of the story. So we grew up going to Southern Baptist Church in Raleigh, Providence Baptist, shout out. Went there throughout my whole childhood and was preached the gospel over and over again. So it was definitely something that was like a part of it. Went to all the summer Bible camps and every year would cry my eyes out and rededicate my life to Christ. So, very much. Oh yeah.
You got a heart.
Oh my gosh. It was like, finally, this is the time, which is super fun. So definitely like had an understanding of the gospel. I feel like in high school kind of was, living on the fence a little bit of like having this like Christian persona, but like not everything lining up with that. And it wasn't until college where it really became my own, where I was kind of like, it was funny. I remember a specific moment beginning of freshman year semester where I was like, am I going to do this God thing? Am I going to party? And I was like, all right, God, I'll give you one semester where I'll go all out in the ministry. And if I hate it, then it's like, I'm going to go party with the frat boys. And ended up starting a Bible study with the frat guys. So went in a very different direction with that. So it's cool.
I love it. I want to ask about childhood dreams because it'll come up later, I think. But I do believe the movie star thing, and if I have a superpower, it's seeing the future. I'm not always good in the present. You can ask Cammie about that. But the future is I live there a lot, and I see the future. And I think the movie star thing, I will call it early. That someday we'll watch this back, and I think you do have a career in the performing arts, and it may take you to the screen. And we won't be so surprised at that. I'm calling it early.
You're going to do some like low budget V3 home movie just so you can nail it.
I think I watched you on film in a parking garage. That's already been done.
Gosh, don't reference that.
When you go back to childhood, there are nights, pretty much every night you're going out and doing stand-up and performing. When you go back to childhood, can you see that, or can you see traces or hints where it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense? I can look back and see little early evidences of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's like hints of it all throughout it. So in preschool, they ask you what you want to be when you grow up, and I said a rock star, which is like pretty funny because I never learned an instrument or sang, but the idea of, I guess, performing sounded interesting to me in preschool.
That's there.
Yeah.
I see it.
For sure. And then I'd say like I got like very obsessed with like stand up very early on. Like I loved like making my parents and family watch like Brian Regan clips. Okay. And just thought the world of it. And I was just like, he's just so funny, and just thinking very highly of that. And the ability, I think I loved like bringing my family together to laugh, which was like really awesome. So had a high appreciation of that a lot. And then I did improv through my church with Bert Hart, a guy who's amazing. Shout out to Bert, through middle school and high school. And that like kind of got my first comedy chops of like being funny on stage and performing at those summer camps, the day before I cried. So
yeah, I didn't know that. I think that's so cool. And that, again, this will come up later, but you hear incredible recording artists and people who are vocalists, musicians, and you talk to them about their origin story in art. And so many times they say, I started out singing in church. Grew up in a family that sang at church. Like, those are a part of so many people's experience because it's communal. I don't think we think about comedy like that, but it's one of these things that points beyond itself. That I love hearing that somebody had the imagination to include that and to nurture that. But I see it in you that it's not just, I mean, it's performance for sure. It's comedy. You're funny. All of that is true, but you love people and that sense of getting your family together. You're still doing that. I think that's part of the production company now is let's do that. Let's do things together that are good. And I think that's really, really cool. Did you, when you were in college, did that dream kind of fade to the back, go out of your mind? Was it paralleling like I got to get a job, I got to figure this out? What was that like as you navigated? Because then you came out and ended up in Chicago of all places. So I'm curious if the dream stayed kind of a guiding light or if it went to the background.
Yeah, it's funny. I was involved in Crew, campus ministry, and within the first semester of being in college, I got asked to be the MC of the weekly meetings. So I was up there with a co-host, and we would open up the meeting and like be funny and like have fun. And oftentimes I was just like kind of going off the dome and like making jokes along the way. So it was never like planned or written material. I think I was always scared to write because I was scared of like failing. Like if something wasn't funny off the top of my head, I could live with it. But like writing a bit seemed like terrifying to me. But I like loved doing that. And it was like it was funny. One time the game that we were supposed to play, it was like we were using the projector and the projector wasn't working. And so I had to like stall for time. So I just like started like just telling random stories about me and my roommate. And it was just like, it went like really well. And I was like, that was kind of felt like my first stand-up set. Yeah. And it was just like, something there that I was like, oh, that's the thing kind of, but didn't get into it until much later.
Yeah. How did you end up in Chicago?
Yeah, so I got a job. It's funny, that last semester of college, I was just applying to a lot of different roles. And the company I applied for, they were asking me, like, you did the application, then it was like, and then list 5 cities you'd want to move to if you got the job. And I was like, oh. I was like, well, Chicago. I was like, I think I did like New York, Dallas, and Denver, like just like the most random places on the planet, and got the job. And they're like, yeah, you're moving to Chicago after 3 months in Colorado. And you're like, what? So it became very real, very fast, and had to, move across the country twice for the job.
Yeah. Chicago's fantastic.
Oh, lovely city.
Yeah. The architecture is great. We do on beauty trips, we'll take people up. You've gone on that trip and do an immersion at the Chicago Art Institute. We've commissioned an artist who went through the Chicago Art Institute. So there's so much to love about Chicago. Is it a comedy city?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's probably a top 3 comedy city right now in the country. Not as much for stand-up. Like, they still have like a very big stand-up scene, but like the improv, like Second City and IO are pretty large there. A lot of SNL cast members like flow through that program to get there.
Okay. So you decided, I mean, this is recently, we have opened the door. At V3, the work to wondrously reveal the gospel and wondrously reveal Christianity, invite people to know God personally. It's still very new to people to think about the arts as a leading edge way to hold out truth. And I think we've drawn from Malcolm Geit's work that beauty is a truth-bearing faculty. It actually is a way that we hold out truth. And we've been strong on standing behind the arts, visually, music, symphonies, all these different ways. And a while ago with our musical artists, our poets, I kept thinking we don't have a performance art person on our team. And as I've been watching your career and your move up into comedy, it's been really inspiring to say that faith can be a part of that. And people might go, well, faith in comedy, right? Like, is that a thing? You send me your clips from being in the city. And I don't know if there's a person who is as boldly in as many spaces night after night, like unashamedly sharing your faith, being a Christian, doing it with wit and humor. Was that intentionally the space that you started? Did you see that as an opportunity, or did you just end up there and go, wow, this is a space that I can bring a lot of light and a lot of good and true and beauty into?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like growing up, appreciating clean comedians that like I could watch with my family was like something that like meant a lot to me. And so when I set out to be a comedian, I always like, well, I want to be clean. So I want like, you know, dads and sons to be able to watch this together and to not be like awkward. So that was always like a pretty high priority for me. And then as I've kind of started in the journey, it's like you write what you know. And so I think there is like a lot of humor in faith and like things that are funny and worth pointing out. And some of it is a little self-deprecating in the faith space, which I think has been able to like engage people in like in a new way. Cause like, I mean, I'm not playing for churches. So it's like a lot of these people aren't Christians. Like aren't there to hear the gospel. And so if I just went up there and tried to preach, it like wouldn't go as well, but kind of like subtly bringing up things that are funny in the faith sphere, I think has been a way to really engage with people. And like after shows, having a lot of really cool conversations from other comics who like appreciate it or audience members who think it's a very interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, it's awesome. And the move that you make to intentionally bring out some of those really maybe awkward parts of the faith where it's tough to understand, or if you haven't grown up with a thick biblical knowledge base, you wouldn't understand anything about this. And it does seem very strange, right? And you have a disarming way of saying, let's look at that. I think that's what great art, right? Buechner, we say it all the time, says, pay attention. That's what an artist is doing, is saying, maybe there's something to pay attention to there. And you do it wonderfully. And I'm listening to these audiences, and you can tell when the room is not filled with Christian people or even people who are favorable toward Christianity. And you bring people into a space. It's phenomenal how powerful art is. What's been your favorite part of the journey? Because it's hard, right? Well, let me back up. Because it's hard. I think one of the things I've loved about your story and getting to know you is how honest you are about the hard parts of life. Mm-hmm. And so often when you become a movie star, we look at movie stars and we're like, oh, it was easy, right? Like that, like must be nice to be born into a family that just has an easy road into that. But then you get to know artists, and that's not the story. Early on, you shared with me that you'd been fired multiple times and had a tough road, and you had the resilience to bounce back. And when I hear these comedy sets, I go, man, some nights you're there and it goes so well. And some nights you can feel that the room just isn't with you. And that's hard, hard, hard. Do you think that your experiences in the tough stuff prepared you uniquely for what you experience in trying to make it in this space?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's a level of comedy requires like failing. And failing like publicly. Like that's one of the funny things about it as an art form, is that you don't get to like practice in a room. And then like if with piano, you can practice piano until you're a competent piano player and then perform for people. But like comedy is a very interesting dynamic where it requires an audience in order to get better. And so you have to like publicly fail so often. And it was interesting in my 20s, you know, having a lot of sales jobs that didn't go well and getting let go of it. I think like that just kind of muscle was one that I didn't like working. I don't like failing. Like it's like a nightmare. Even to this day when it doesn't go well, you're like, gosh dang it. But that muscle of like failing isn't an identity statement. I think like that so often, like failing at my sales job, failing at comedy, like it has trained me to not view that as like a reflection of like who I am as a person. And I think in a way that was really important for me in my early 20s, because my job, like how much money I made, where I lived, like early on, like getting out of college, like that's kind of the identity you fall into. And so immediately having that like, well, you can't have your identity in your work because you're being fired every other year. It was very easy to be like, well, this clearly isn't my identity. And like kind of distancing myself from what I do isn't who I am, which is important.
Yeah. I imagine, right? Like when you come home and say, hey, mom, dad, I'm going to be a doctor, right?
Yeah.
Easy. Parents are like, oh, great, right? We get it. Not saying becoming a doctor is easy, all that, like all my doctor friends,
Just good
we
with
love you. It's
flashcards.
very hard, right? But as a parent, it's easy to endorse because there's all the external markers of success and intrinsic and extrinsic. It's like a noble profession, like yes to doctors. When you share with your parents, did you ever like dare to say to them, like, hey, I think I want to do comedy. I think I want to do art as a vocation. I feel called to it. Did that ever come up, or did you keep that back and let it kind of unfold?
Yeah, I'd like told them that I was going to start doing open mics, and as I like began it, I really wanted to like keep going. Like I started it in 2020 when I was like 25, so I was just kind of like, I'm going to start doing this and see where it goes. And I think like letting them know the intention of like, yeah, this is really what I want to do. You know, they were never supportive. No, I'm just kidding. I know they're listening to this.
They're just like,
They'd be so mad.
they almost started texting you immediately.
They're like, what the heck, man? No, they've always been like very supportive. I think like they, you know, wanted me to be practical, like not just quit my job and, you know, start driving Uber. You know, if it's like as much as you can balance, like still progressing your career and doing comedy, like that makes sense. And so they've always been like super supportive, but also wanting me to like be practical in how I'm pursuing it, which I think it wasn't really like a drawback, was more like made a ton of sense to be like, well, if you can work a full-time corporate job and it's not getting in the way of comedy, why would you not keep doing that? And so they always had like practical advice and wanted to make sure that it wasn't, I was just chasing being a star comedian versus like actually enjoying being a comedian. So they were very supportive, but also I think pushed back in reasonable ways to make me like really think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, again, to your point on comedy as a public art, it requires being very public. I don't know that you would be like, you might very early on think, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to go be famous. But I don't think there's anybody probably who does comedy who isn't in it because they love it, because it is hard. Like there is no making it feel easier. I love your analogy of playing piano in private. I love to paint because I can just paint over the top of my canvases and be like, I think I'll start over, right? Because that does not look like an apple or whatever it is that I'm trying. Nobody ever knows, right, that that's happening. So I think that it's powerful to stay in it. For artists who are kind of hearing you and they're like, yeah, when I was a kid, I can look back and there's something I loved. And I did imagine myself doing that and maybe participating in that. And if I see this trail, it was happening, but I was too scared to say it. What would you say to that person who is trying to discern, is this something I should take seriously or not? Like, how did you come to the point of going, no, I think this is something that's God given and I should pay attention to it?
Yeah, it's interesting. So like I moved to Chicago and didn't do any stand up while I was there, even though I wanted to. Like in my head, I was like, I'd like to do stand up, and like never did it for like the year and a half. And then I moved back to North Carolina for like 6 months because I'd gotten fired. And I started working. My favorite job I ever worked was at UPS. I was a delivery driver, and I didn't get to drive the truck. I had to drive my own car, and he would give me packages and I'd go deliver them. And it was a very funny job. But I could just listen to podcasts all day, and it paid like $20 an hour, which I was like, that's pretty good. And I started just listening to all these comedians' podcasts, and a lot of them would talk about how they started. And it just like kind of clicked in my head because I was so intimidated to like go do stand up because I was like, I don't think I'm funny. Like, what if I find out I'm not funny? Was like the realization of that. It's like, if I go and they don't laugh, then it's like, then I'm doomed. And I think like listening to all of them talk about early starting out, it being difficult, it being hard, like you're not initially getting famous, like you're failing a lot in the beginning, I think helped encourage me to like take that first step of like, well, let me sign up for the open mic. Let me just go do it once and like see how it goes. And that I was so glad that I finally took the step to just starting to do it, because especially stand-up's a very unique one where it's like once you perform, it helps you kind of like, oh, okay, this is a little bit more how it has to go, how to write better jokes, how the setup punchline aspect of it. So you learn so much by doing it. And also I think the reality is like moving in the direction that you want to go is like is great and like helpful and the best thing you can do. If you're like, I want to start painting, well, buy some paint and start painting. And I think the level of like, you don't have to put the pressure on yourself to be amazing at the beginning. You know, like if you tried to go play Beethoven's Fifth on the piano the first time, like that's not what's going to happen. You're playing Mary Had a Little Lamb. And I think giving yourself the grace to realize that art is a muscle and that like ultimately you have to like work it and build it in order to become any of that. I mean, that was one of the funny things I did in Chicago is that I took singing lessons and I realized that I had never really sang. That it's like there's this like muscle thing you do with your diaphragm. I mean, I had heard people say that, but I had no idea what they were talking about. And that first moment, and it was like 3 lessons in, that first moment where I felt it come from the diaphragm and not from like my throat was the craziest moment. I was like, oh. And he was like, yeah, that's a muscle you can build upon and get better at singing. And it's like, I always thought Adele just had it, you know? And it's like, that's not it at all. It's like requires work. So giving yourself starting, just do it. And then giving yourself grace to not be amazing at it and realizing that over time you build up the muscle to like get there.
Yeah. I'm Zach Elliott, Executive Director of VUVIBO, and together with our partners, we are recovering the deep Christian tradition of standing behind the arts by making significant investment in visual art, music, and literature. We're working together with some of the world's most gifted fine artists, composers, and authors to wondrously reveal Christianity and invite people to know God personally. This work to recover the tradition of standing behind the arts is going to take a fresh generation of patrons committed to resourcing and releasing these great artists to use the highest and best of their gifts to the glory of God and for the good of the world. You can join us in that work by becoming a V3 partner. Reach out for more information or go to vuvivo.com/support to join us in standing behind the arts. That's so good. Like just even the starting, I love what you said that you can start painting, you can start tinkering around on the piano or like playing around with an instrument. And that may not be the thing that ultimately you land on, right? And who knows, right? I think you love comedy and comedy is a part of it. But I just heard Nate Bargatze the other day say he's retiring, like he's done. Like, and I don't know if he was just being funny, but I think there's a next for him. He's like, man, there's still a part of the craft that's developing and who knows where that'll lead. So you may start painting and pick up a brush and then realize that it was music that you were wanting to fall in love with, but it gets you there. So just start. Have you ever wanted to stop? Like seriously, have you ever gotten to the point where you've considered quitting?
Yeah, it's funny. I forget what comedian it was because I never quit comedy because I was terrified of having to say I used to do comedy. Like, that just seemed like such an embarrassing thing to say. But I had to hold it out for years because last year I did a lot of self-reflection on it because I was kind of scared that I was just doing comedy because it was like, it's an interesting thing to say you do that like, obviously like as someone who enjoys like being like celebrated, like making a room full of people laugh is fun.
Feels great.
Yeah, it like feels good. So of course it's like I'm enjoying this, but it's like, do I really love comedy? Is that specifically what I like to do? I think I had to do some self-reflection to make sure that it's like really the thing versus it just makes me feel good in certain ways. So at times like I've thought about it, but like the other day I was just like driving home and I was just like, I can't imagine not like doing it. Like not pursuing it in some way just seems insane to me. And like, I don't know what that looks like long-term, but the idea of like not doing comedy anymore feels like very weird to me. So it feels like it's for sure the thing. I'm going to be doing it on some level. Maybe I'll never get funny, but like, I'm definitely going to be like going after it.
I love it
for my life.
Cammie and I were just on a walk the other day and, you know, people always ask
Cammie?
you that question. Yeah. We were walking and you always have those conversations. You have said this before, like if you had all the money in the world, what would you do? Right? Like those questions come up and we were saying like, if we just were independently wealthy, what would change or would anything change? And I was like, no, I love being a part of making things that point beyond themselves. And so I just have a deep joy of being able to participate with artists and make symphonies and visual commissions and everything that V3 is doing. That's just a joy. I can't imagine not doing it, right?
Yeah.
Like, I can't imagine not doing it. I think that's a beautiful piece of encouragement and advice. Like, find the thing in your life that you can't imagine not doing and pay attention to that. Buechner again says, like, what on vocation, he says, like, find where your deep gladness or your deep joy meets the world's great need. And it's been so fun to talk to my kids just about how do you find what your joy is? What is that thing that's a deep gladness? I can't not do it, but it's also a good for the world. And I want to point to this because Peter Berger says this about comedy, right? Somebody might say, well, Jared, that's your deep joy for sure. Who wouldn't want to be in a room full of people and get paid for it and have everybody laughing? That's great. But is it really a deep need of the world? This is what Berger says, and I want you to comment on this. Like, what do you think of it? Do you think he's on to something with this? But this is what Peter Berger says in a book called Redeeming Laughter, which I gave you this book, and I was like, you're going to love this.
Isn't it Rumors of Angels?
No, this is Redeeming Laughter, is the one on comedy that's really academic. And yeah, that's what
I'm not smart enough for that.
It's not like how to write jokes.
Yeah. I need
This is
that
what
one
Berger
too.
says in Redeeming Laughter. He says, by laughing at the imprisonment of the human spirit, humor implies that this imprisonment is not final, but will be overcome, and by this implication provides yet another signal of transcendence in the form of an intimation of redemption. I love that. He says that this imprisonment is, by laughing about it, we're almost able to point to something that feels like the imprisonment of the soul and say, that's not the last word. And he says the implication is that's a signal of transcendence. He sees humor, laughter, comedy as a signal of transcendence, pointing beyond itself. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think the ability to like go into a topic that's like really heavy and make light of that. Like, there's something about that like laughing in the midst of pain that is otherworldly. I mean, they talk about laughter being the best medicine, which like sounds like some kind of corny phrase, but you talk to anybody who's like going through a tough time, and I've had it happen to me when I'm having a bad day, and then I scroll through Twitter for 15 minutes and a couple memes make me laugh. And there's a levity that I feel, despite the fact that my circumstances have not changed, that are like really special and I think unique. And I mean, I've seen it happen with people where it's like someone's joking about a topic that's deeply personal to them and it's like not a fun topic at all. And their ability to just shine a little bit of a light in there, like, brings a levity to it. Mike Birbiglia does this really wonderfully. He has a lot of like one-man show type stand-up specials. And I mean, he talks about like how his grandfather had a heart attack at 55, like his father had a heart attack at 55. And he's like, so I thought I'd just Airbnb a place near the hospital at 55, take that whole year off. And it's like, oh, that's a deeply like painful thing, but he's just like making light of it in a way that's like, I think probably would connect with other people who've had like their grandparents or parents have had health issues.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so good. There are moments where we in health journeys, we've been on a few this last year, where you've sent me a clip and we'll be laughing, right, while I'm brushing my teeth, which does make a mess, and it's happened before. I have you to thank for that. But it does open up something that is pointing beyond itself, that this imprisonment, this death, this decay, this brokenness doesn't get the last word. We talk about that all the time, that reality is commingled. It's good at the same time that there's deep brokenness and there's a future. It doesn't get the last word. And we're going to laugh and look back. And sharing in that is so powerful. And if you haven't read A Rumor of Angels that you recommended, that's Berger's other book. And he goes right in it and says that in a culture that's post-Christian, right? In a landscape where people don't know what does the gospel even mean? Is there such thing as sin? I don't even know what you're talking about. That's the post-Christian landscape. And I think Berger's right on to say, in a landscape like that, the first thing that we have to do is peek up and say, is there something beyond us? And there's these signals of transcendence that do that. Art, beauty, laughter. Laughter is one of these things, and Berger says it in his book. There's no biological need for it. We could strip that away and we would survive. But there's a quality to life that comes from it that seems to be a signal of something that we were made for. And I think that's why you as an artist in this particular art form is so powerful, right? In the midst of war and rumors of war, that those things don't have the final word. And that a comedian can come and say, let's look at the absurdities. Let's look at the contradictions. Let's look at the inconsistencies in worldviews, in faiths, in our own lives. And we don't have to be scared of them. We can look at those things. And by doing that, we can find our way to truth. And if we lose that, we lose something essential, not just about preaching the gospel, but about what it is to be human. And so we're in the debt of so many artists, but I think for artists in this craft that maybe doesn't get the same serious attention as maybe the fine arts would, we hope at V3 to say, no, it's essential that a Christian perspective is brought to that space. How do you do that well? I'm sure there's pressure to say, oh, I could make these people laugh by touching the base things or by going to these spaces that I can get a quick laugh or whatever. You probably have to work harder to, as Berger says, redeem laughter. How do you do that to stay true to that desire to say, I want a dad to be able to laugh with his kids and I got to be funny? These people who have very different values, they have to think what I'm talking about is funny and the way I do it. How do you meet both of those?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like having a high standard for the art is like hard. And I mean, like, it's like funny to talk about comedy in this way because it's like at the end of the
That's
day,
not what I was
like, some jokes are like about how, like, I'm not fat, but if you saw me running, you'd be proud of me, which is like a very stupid joke. And I'm like, yeah, that's high art, high quality. That's redeeming the art form. It's like, I mean, no, but it is somewhat funny and unfortunately true. And so I think there's a balance of like, man, pursuing excellence within comedy is like to avoid being, we call it hacky, which is like the low hanging fruit, the easy jokes, and to go deeper into that. And I think especially clean, when you're doing it clean, it elevates you to a degree, not that you're better than other people, but like it's so much harder and you have to be better at writing jokes and setting up and doing a lot of the technical stuff well in order to get laughs and make it an enjoyable time. And I think the other portion of that is like wanting to be like a Christian and like in the comedian space. I think like people like Nate Bargatze have done that really well, where like he's a Christian and he's clean, but like you could watch a set and not even realize either of those things are true, but he is marked different. Like people can feel the difference with him and like are drawn to him in a way that I think is very unique. And you see that in the success that he has. I think he made 80 million on his tour last year, which is like, yeah, I could live with 80 million. Like that's pretty good. So the standard of, getting rid of any low hanging fruit of jokes and like pushing the jokes to always be better and improving the act, I think is like really important in that. And I don't know, like I bombed last night for a couple minutes. So it's like, it's an ever growing thing. But I think I think the temptation to be a Christian in a space is to be like, well, I have to lead with the gospel. I have to lead with like Jesus. Like if I'm poking fun at Jesus or heaven or any of these things, it's like, that's a bad thing. I have to elevate that and make those things amazing. But I think like the important thing for me is like, I just want to make it digestible. And if it's like funny, it's like people will at least be hearing you, whether it's subconsciously they're like really taking that in or just thinking about what heaven would actually be like. And if it would actually be maybe a little awkward at times, it's like, that's like a unique thing that like, I've had a ton of people come up to me afterwards, have thought about it and who will be there, who won't be there kind of questions, which are just always fascinating to get into. So,
yeah, no, I love that. And it starts you on a trail, right? A good question. Jesus, that's how he preached to God. He would ask questions. And in a way, your art form allows you to put a question out there for people that they're in the parking lot and they're like, I haven't thought about heaven for a while.
Yeah,
maybe I should. And to your point about leading with Jesus, I think that's what we say at V3 all the time. The vision is Jesus. And I think an underappreciated part of this is the embodiment of the reality of the life of Christ is the way we preach most and best most often, right? That it's Jesus was the firstborn of many. He is what it looks like to be who we were made to be. And so leading with Jesus is to walk into a place and to prefer the least of these and to make a light appear just by simply loving and seeking the will of the other, willing the good of the others. When a comedian comes in a competitive space where everybody's trying to find their way forward and you're intentionally loving other people, seeking their highest good, celebrating their wins, serving, picking things up. You did that today, right? Like your embodiment of your faith is leading with Jesus. And I think bankers are doing that. Lawyers are doing that. Doctors are doing that. All the things that our moms were hoping we would become, right? Like they're all doing that same thing too. Yeah. So good on you. For V3, it means so much to have V3 artists. And what it means to us is that there are people who are called and they are gifted and they are putting the work in to be credible in the space of their art form. And so we have Shauna, who's a musical artist for V3, who is got her master's degree at UF, highly, highly accomplished pianist and incredible musician, vocalist. We've got Megan Turnquist, who's a vocalist and just an incredible musician, but she's also an actress and she is pursuing her work in that space. We've got Wendy Kiefer, who's on here a lot, writing poetry and publishing poetry. So it means so much to V3 to be able to stand behind the arts by actually investing in artists. That's what it means to us, because we see the work you're doing in the world. What does it mean? What has it meant to you as you start to get your mind around like, oh, wow, I'll not just be an artist, but I'll be a V3 artist, somebody who is supported and encouraged to keep doing this work?
Yeah, I mean, I think the journey of an artist can oftentimes be a lonely one. I'd gotten a comedy club gig and I was like pretty excited about it. And just talking to other comedians at times when they've got booked for shows, or like my buddy who's a traveling artist, Brendan Abernathy, he just talked about like no one's ever going to be as excited as you are. Like when you get like a big break or something happens. And it was like interesting to hear him say that, but also to know that like V3 is like supporting me and they're with me on that. And is like going to be excited. And I think that just means a lot, that like people are like there for you and want to like see you win and want to help in whatever way they can. And the fact that they care. I think like sometimes like, especially when you're going to open mics, you bomb and you have to drive home. And it's like, it can be such like a devastating journey. And you're like, why am I doing this? And to know that other people care, are there for you and want to hear you out and be there, I think like means the world to me. And is, I think changes the way I can like approach it and know that it's not everything. It's not my whole identity, but it is a craft that I'm working on and that it's meaningful too. I think some people don't view it as meaningful or just this like random thing that I'm doing, but it's like, no, it's purposeful. And it's like the ability to get to sneak past watchful dragons, as you say, and like get to preach the gospel in spaces that are like, I mean, I'll do Christian jokes, get off. And then the next comedian typically like rails on Christians all the time, like immediately, and kills. People love it when they just start making fun of Christians. So like that ability to like get in those kind of places and be a little bit of a light. And I need to get funnier, but it's like awesome. It's awesome to get to do that. And like, I mean, it's great off stage to be having a lot of like gospel conversations. Yeah. And like, that's like, it's so bewildering to me. And like, God just like makes it happen. Cause I like, don't want to be that guy who's like trying to like, if I go to every open mic and try to preach the gospel to comedians, they're not going to want to talk to me. But the way that like God kind of brings people where like natural conversations just happen, where someone's like, you really believe all that? And I was like, yeah. And like we go from there. And so other people have initiated conversations, and getting to talk about Jesus has been really cool.
Yeah, man, it's so cool. Your work is deeply meaningful, and we're grateful for you leaning into that space and going on the journey to deepen it and become great in the thing that God's called you to. So it's an honor to call you a V3 artist and to introduce you as a V3 artist. And I'm excited to see what God is going to do and how, whether that's one-on-one conversations at a comedy club that nobody would ever hear or come in contact with a Christian person who seeks their highest good. I think that's the important thing that you're saying, that you get to go in there and be for people. And so many people are like, man, all I feel is like, if God exists, he's got to be against me.
Mm.
And it's like, man, the gospel is this profoundly other story, good news of great joy that God isn't against us. He's for us, to the point of like giving his own life for us. And unless somebody carries that good news from a distant country right to your doorstep, you may never hear it. And you may never hear it because you'll be hearing false versions of that are in your own head, but you carry it right there. So thank you for your work. As we kind of wrap to a close, we went on this journey as the Wayfarer Podcast, which is a great way of framing it. But the point was to invite people to reimagine the Christian faith through a more ancient lens of like, hey, it's not a one-stop decision in your brain. It's a lifetime of pursuing a life with Jesus. And we wanted to have that conversation about the challenges and the struggles. But just as a man, as a person, as an artist, how have you changed in that journey? How has your faith changed, and how were you changed by just being a part of the Wayfarer conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I think the language around it is very unique. I don't think I'd really thought about the journey of faith after you say yes. Like, I thought about it, it's like, well, you read your Bible and you pray and you get wiser, I guess, or smarter. I don't know, whatever it is. It's like, I guess you become more spiritual somehow. And I think a lot of like people kind of feel that lostness of, well, all right, I got baptized, I prayed when I was a kid, but like I have to go to work 9 to 5. So
Yeah.
like, what is that? What does any of this mean? And I think the vision up, vision in, vision out was a really great kind of framework of like thinking about like the continual journey of faith. And very similar, I think for me particular, the struggles I had was this, I'm either a Christian or I'm not, or like I'm doing things, like I'm living like a Christian or I'm not, or like I'm a comedian or I'm not a comedian, and like taking just steps like towards faith and like seeing it as a journey. Like the run the race thing always, I was like, oh, I'm a runner, but like the reality of that, of like, it's a step by step by step, day after day of pursuing Christ and living like him, and by becoming more like him over time, that it's not a immediate thing. And it's also not something you control.
Yeah.
Like, I think you often want to be like, well, if I read my Bible, if I do this study, if I memorize all these verses, all of a sudden I become this very wise person. And it's that trick of, well, I have to work to become more wise, instead of the just letting go and following him, I think has made me grow in so many ways that have been super profound, of just the mentality around my faith and who I am and my identity, versus I think previously I was very much, even though I knew works-based faith wasn't there, still struggling with that in a big way. And it's funny how that creates so much shame that you have to deal with. And I was just struggling with these shame cycles where I'd like pull myself up on my boots and like live for God for a couple weeks and then kind of fall off and be doing whatever. And it was just like, oh, I'm the worst. I'm a terrible Christian. And it's like, but if you knew your identity, the walk might look similar in like pursuing Christ, but like you're not struggling with like, am I a Christian? Does God love me? Like all these big questions that I for years was just like, does God love me? Because I'm not sure I like myself right now. Like, I don't know how he can love me when I hate me, And I think, man, getting to rest in that God loves me was like pretty massive. And I think understanding it as a journey and not something that you're going to be perfect immediately, it was really profound for me, and helped me kind of really start to rest in that identity and that love a lot more, which has revolutionized my faith.
Yeah. I love that you keyed in on rest. And I think I love these things that Jesus said, like, all who are weary, all who are thirsty, come to me and you'll find rest for your soul. Or return to the ancient ways, the old path, stand, and there you'll find rest for your soul. Like this idea that there is a rest for your soul that comes. It's not performance. It's not, Riley said this on a Wayfarer podcast, it's not a light switch that you flip on, flip off, flip on, flip off. That's just that's an anxiety-ridden way to be. And that is not rest for your soul. And the profound invitation Jesus makes is he says, you don't do it. I did it and I do it in you and through you, right? Like, come to me,
Yeah.
all who are weary, and I will give you rest. And when you experience it, it's pretty wonderful, and it sets you free to go be who he's made you to be. And you're doing that. So, man, thank you. It's an honor to get to celebrate this in a little bit of a different context, because you do so many other things with V3 and for V3. But super proud of you and your journey as an artist, and proud to introduce you as a V3 artist. So thanks for sharing the time and giving people a little glimpse into your story. And I hope if you were listening to this, maybe that you don't look at comedy, but like we always say, look through it and let it be a signal of transcendence and an art form that causes you to look beyond it. So Jared, thanks, man.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah.